And with that, let me say welcome to the sixth and final workshop in this Green Entrepreneurship online workshop series that we've been hosting over the last 6 weeks. Today's topic is succeeding as a student with a green startup. And before we jump into that particular topic, let me just share a little bit of background information. If this is your first time joining us, please look at the bottom of your screen for an interpretation icon. If you can click that icon, select your preferred language from amongst the choices there of English, Spanish, or French, and then click the icon again and mute the original audio channel, and that will allow you to hear the entire session in your preferred language. So click the interpretation icon, choose your language, and then mute the original audio. My name's Brock Dickinson. I'm the entrepreneur in residence with the University of Waterloo. And I've been helping to host these series of workshops over the last 6 weeks. And as is our custom in Canada, I want to start today's session with what we refer to as a land acknowledgement. We are being hosted by the University of Waterloo through these sessions, and the university is located on the traditional territories of the Neutral, Anishinaabeg, and Haudenosaunee peoples. The University of Waterloo is also situated on the Haldimand Tract, which is land that was actually promised to the Six Nations and includes 6 miles on each side of the Grand River. We also want to acknowledge our partners in this workshop series. We've been thrilled to have the support of the Commission for Environmental Cooperation throughout this series. As always, they are providing technical support today and interpretation support, and they've been a huge help in terms of logistics and promotions and engaging with people all across North America to be part of this particular set of sessions. We're very grateful to the CEC for all of the work and all of the effort that they have offered up as part of this program. We'd also like to acknowledge the participation and support of the EcoInnovation Network. This is a network of universities across North America with an interest in green innovation. And as you can see from the collection of universities, we're literally all over the region, in Canada, in Mexico, in the United States, working in multiple languages. And it's been great to have the active participation of those 8 universities in particular in the efforts to pull this program together. We will be sort of working through a series of presentations today, but later there will be an opportunity for a question and answer session. The chat function is open, and so you can engage with other participants, but we would note that we're not actively monitoring the chat. That's just for users to kind of use on their own. If you wish to pose questions to any of our presenters, use the Q&A function, and those questions can be posed in any of our 3 working languages today. So feel free to ask your questions in English, in French, or in Spanish, and we'll be selecting some of those questions to put to our presenters later in the program. And finally, I want to turn things over to today's Master of Ceremonies, our MC for the session. And it's my pleasure to introduce Nick Palaschuk. Nick is a PhD candidate in Sustainability Management at the University of Waterloo, and he serves as the university's Youth Ambassador to the EcoInnovation Network. He has a bachelor's degree in Restoration Ecology and a master's in Technology and Public Policy, both from the University of Winnipeg. And he's worked in the past with Indigenous communities on community-based social enterprise initiatives. He is an Energy Council of Canada Policy Research Fellow, and he volunteers with the Academy for Sustainable Innovation, the EcoInnovation Network, and the Graduate Students Association at the University of Waterloo. I had Nick as a student a couple of years ago, and I have to say it's one of my real pleasures to have him now as a colleague and a coworker. So Nick, it's great to have you here today, and I will turn things over to you.
Well, thank you, Brock, for the kind words and the amazing introduction. It's a privilege to be here, and I'm particularly excited to be granted the privilege to moderate this discussion, and not only because I'm a student attending a university with quite a notable culture for supporting entrepreneurship, but as a researcher in organizational behavior, I really do believe entrepreneurship in entrepreneurial universities to be sort of a lock and key in training the up and coming workforce and really shaping the future of work, equipping workers with adaptability, flexibility, a passion for continuous learning, I think are all, fundamental capabilities in the future workforce. And so much like Brock had touched on, this series has been developed both by the University of Waterloo in partnership with the Commission for Environmental Cooperation and the EcoInnovation Network. To date, we've had an amazing level of participation. 800 participants have signed up from over 48 countries, and there's significant diversity in the audience today and throughout the entirety of this series. Despite our time differences, we've had participants every single week from countries including Cameroon, Germany, Ghana, Kenya, Turkey, and the United Kingdom. And today, again, we will be translating simultaneously in English, French, and Spanish. So make sure to connect to your preferred audio channel and mute the main channel in doing so. So a summary of my role, I'll be introducing today's panel of speakers and presenters. This is going to be followed by, so we'll have 4 main panelists today, and then open our discussion to a Q&A, where you can use a Q&A function embedded in Zoom to pose questions directly to the panelists. And I'll do my best to select a few representative questions to make sure we get a really robust and engaging dialogue going. We'll try to conclude today's event at about 90 minutes, so 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So with that being said, we're going to now invite each of our panelists to talk for about 15 minutes on the topics broadly related to student success in green entrepreneurship, with some final words coming from Dominique Croteau and the CEC regarding the 2021 Youth Innovation Challenge. I'll be introducing each speaker before they speak to give you guys a brief background on where our speakers are coming from and sort of the expertise they'll be providing us. And as this is going on, I do encourage you to try to think of any questions you might have for them and type those into the Q&A function. So with that being said, for the sake of time, I'd like to get started and introduce our first panelist today, Jackie Lee. Jackie Lee is the founder of Recruit My Friends, a top talent recruitment agency in the technology industry. And she actually started this company 15 years ago while a student. So undoubtedly she'll have tremendous insights for us. And she now specializes in working with fast growth software companies to attract and retain top performers. Recruit My Friends clients are based in San Francisco, San Diego, LA, New York, Toronto, Waterloo, and London in the UK, with plans to expand to Hong Kong and Singapore in late 2020. Typically, Recruit My Friends clients are tech startups that have raised anywhere between $200 and $300 million in financing and are in the seed, Series A to Series E level of financing. Jackie has since become an active angel investor, particularly in female-founded software startups. Recently, she has also launched Masks for COVID, an open-source social enterprise partnered with Sunnybrook Hospital in Toronto, and retailer Canadian Tire. Using 3D printing technology, it has created reusable N95 equivalent masks for surgeons and other frontline workers in response to PPE shortages. Jackie and her Masks for COVID co-founder, Dr. Brian Lee and Alan Song, met as students at the University of Waterloo, where Jackie graduated with an honors degree with a minor in psychology. Jackie, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Nick, and thank you so much, everyone, for having me. The timing of this couldn't be better, to be honest, and I'm really honored to be a part of this group today and to learn from each of the speakers today as well. I know that the topic today is student entrepreneurship, so I thought I'd start by saying I might be a little out of date. I was a student entrepreneur. I hope that what I can give as some insights and experiences is relevant and helpful and fruitful to you. But thank you again for your time today. My student experience, I want to start first and foremost with a story about failure. I actually failed out of the University of Waterloo. So for those of you that are students in the audience right now, I know what it's like to be struggling, whether it's through your project, your startup, or your courses. And especially being a student entrepreneur, it's extremely hard to be successful, even in school, as well as in entrepreneurship. I failed 7 out of 10 courses and was kicked out of school, not kicked, asked to leave and take some time off to reflect. And then I came back online after some time off. The university, I think, has since changed some of their rules around that. However, it was an amazing learning experience because I learned what failure would bring in the future, so I could navigate the waters of failure, as entrepreneurship, of course, does bring that at times. This is something that I realized I had to wrap my emotional arms around. And I think it's very relevant because as entrepreneurs, we are very likely to have a lot of failure along the way, but it's super important to be able to ask for help. So first and foremost, I actually invite you, even though we are just meeting today for the first time, to reach out and ask for help, both from myself and advisors and others on this group chat in the future, if you're failing now or in the future. So, and please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll preface that now in case I forget. And just take a look at Jackie Lee, Recruit My Friends, and I'm happy to connect with you there. Most importantly, managing your time through failure is very difficult. I know personally I lost a lot of sleep when I was failing out of school, and so it actually pushed me to become more of an entrepreneur. I realized that in biochemistry and pre-med, I was never going to be the smartest student. I had come from being pretty smart in high school, came on scholarship to Waterloo, and all of a sudden, especially at Waterloo, realized, oh gosh, I'm actually not that smart in terms of academics. So I had to find ways to find other ways to both make money and start a business. And so I actually managed my time by joining the tennis team and as well getting involved in student entrepreneurship. So I started co-hosting conferences called Impact Entrepreneurship Group. And we were bringing in entrepreneurs that spoke to the student body, both in Toronto, Waterloo, Vancouver, and many other areas across the country. And that company actually turned into kind of the grassroots movement of the student body of Velocity, which is the on-campus incubator, as well as off-campus now in Kitchener. So it's amazing how far that's come, and all it started was from a grassroots movement of student entrepreneurs. And that was actually where I got my very first speakers. The first speakers that I had were back in 2003 and 2004, and they were my very first clients. And the way that that happened was I was always listening, always hungry to learn from them, and I always followed up afterwards. So again, I invite you on LinkedIn to follow up with me afterwards. You never know where it could lead. But I would make sure that I went after every speaker, after every conference I attended, including the ones that I organized, and really built a relationship with them. And that's the best part about being a student. The world is your oyster. You have all of the opportunity in the world. And so people will take your phone call. People will take coffee meetings, again, after the COVID crisis, when it's safe to do so. They'll take coffees, they'll connect with you by phone, especially if you ask politely and with some positive intent in mind. So please don't hesitate to network, both with myself and others today. And please reach out to people that you don't even feel that you deserve to reach out to. And I'll go on to my business. And again, it started from the speakers, and it was just with some simple questions. After I would meet with them for coffee, I would ask them, is there any way I can help you? And I knew in my head, I'm just a student. What could I possibly give to a CEO or a CTO of these heavily funded companies? And across the board, the number one question was, we're hiring. Do you have any friends we could hire from Waterloo? And so it just, by happenstance, by opportunity of the fact that I was at the University of Waterloo, arguably one of the best engineering schools in the world, because we work with IIT in India, many IIT university sites, and Cornell, Harvard, Stanford, many other schools across the world. Truly Waterloo, and it's not just because I'm biased, but you see Waterloo grads coming out and their salaries are much higher because of the co-op system. So it just happened to be that opportunity knocked where I was at the school, that I happened to know a ton of engineers because I was involved in other projects, volunteering, that I said, sure, I'll set you up with some engineers. And so I just started for about a year. I was volunteering and just really, in my mind, though, it was paying it back, helping the speakers out by bringing engineers to their network. And so I wasn't making any money. I didn't even know that recruiting could be a business, to be honest, for almost probably a year and a quarter at least. And it wasn't until I kept asking questions, which was, do you pay others to do this? Or like, you know, and luckily, actually, it turned out that they kind of offered, because the speakers, then my informal mentors, and now still to this day, 17 years later, my mentors, they basically said, you know, we do actually pay people for this. So if you could continue through your undergrad, we'll be happy to give you money for this. And I thought, oh my goodness, because I was always very social. If you can't tell, I'm pretty outgoing. So I decided to use that as sort of my secret, power. And that's something really important, is know what you're really good at. And I love to bring people together. I knew very quickly in biochemistry, I was literally the bottom of the class. So I wasn't even mediocre. I was the bottom of the class. And having come from being the top of the class, that was a very healthy realization and healthy lesson to learn. What I would say is that, when you take your career to the next level and you realize that your network, everybody you're networking with today, and everyone that is in your class, your advisors, every single person, if you can bring them some value without asking for anything in return, that is really the key to networking. That altruism is really the healthiest way to live your life. And it will always pay it back, sometimes many years later. I want to take a moment to recognize, we recently, just earlier this week, lost our amazing Dean of Engineering, Pearl Sullivan. And she was someone that was just phenomenal. She helped me in my career. She wasn't Dean when I was in school, but right after school, she became Dean. And even though I was never an engineering student, but I had ingrained myself in the engineering community, she would always invite me out to events, ask me to speak, introduce me to new contacts of hers. And so she was just such an amazing amplifier of what I already did. So think of yourselves as the amplifiers to your own career and your own business right now, because that in the future is going to lead to sales channels. So thinking about that networking side of things and volunteering, think about how right now you have opportunities that are endless around you. And it's because of the people first and foremost on this chat today, on the video call today, as well as the people that are organizing. Firstly, Brock Dickinson, thank you again so much for inviting me, and everyone should be connecting with him afterwards if you're staying true to the core principle here. The second thing I want to say is being naive. When you're a student, you really can't fail. It feels like failure at the time because we're taught that as close as you can get to 100% means that you're either doing better or you're succeeding. I quickly learned that being naive, I thought, okay, I have to not just follow what everybody else is doing, which is getting to 100 or as close to 100 as possible, which for me, I was just happy if I got 75. But I had to look at it practically and naively and say, okay, I'm not going to be able to get as close to 100 compared to my classmates. And so I'm going to learn how to get 65, because with 65, you still get the same degree. And I'm going to use the rest of my 2 years to study entrepreneurship, to figure out other areas that I can move into. And so I started coding. Again, a very humbling experience. I very quickly learned I was not a good developer. But because of my projects that I was involved with coding, I have some of my best friends still to this day that were in computer science, software engineering, and we all worked together as clients and as friends, and they were helping me and tutoring me at the time. So again, something that would have been rather, I guess, embarrassing, or seen as more of a deficit, actually became one of the biggest allies that I could have created in that environment. So think about your environment and think about the fact that you have the best chance right now, because if you're a student, you're used to not having very much money yet. And that's really key. And that's usually the inhibitor in the future for people taking risks to entrepreneurship. So again, embrace that and recognize that's a blessing every day, that when you go into starting your business, making any money is a great thing. The last thing I want to talk about is taking that naivety, turning it into clients. And I'm actually trying to take my very own advice and embrace naivety. I'm right now 38. I still feel like I'm 24 or younger. I will probably be, 85 and still saying that. And I remember having some really good influences, just saying, stay young at heart, stay young in your mind, always challenge yourself, and pretty much, start things with a clean slate. And so right now, I'm trying to take my own advice every day. I'm working with 2 other developers, Ariane and Daniel, that are University of Waterloo grads as well. And we have created a careers platform. This is a platform that is meant to help many more people than what we can currently help with my current business. It's a platform for engineers to track and manage their careers. We're also going to be focusing on product management and business roles in the future. However, right now, our forte, and again, knowing our niche and our environment and our network, is specifically with software developers and engineers. So we're creating a platform where a lot of the concept of mentorship will be digitized. We're taking, and actually I'd like to invite all of you that are here to a conference that starts for the careers platform. Just go to careersplatform.co And the conference will be starting December 19th for 3 days in a row. We're taking executives from Tesla, Google, Zynga, and Snapchat even, and a bunch of startups. So all engineers that I've worked with, it just happens to be that they're all Waterloo grads and they've become executives now. And they're just going to be sharing advice. It's a free conference, so you don't have to be a technologist to attend either. Everyone is welcome. And again, just go to our website and register there. We'll send you out the details. We've always been operating in stealth mode, again, because of naivety. We are just now going into a new era for our business. And for me, that is more the professional era. I like to protect the word of expert. Whenever I see somebody on their resume or their LinkedIn or whatnot, if they say expert, I always kind of question it, because what I've learned in top performance and in engineering is that it takes a good 15 to 20 years at least to gain an expertise. And so you and your business right now are likely naive. Hopefully you've got some expertise in a certain area you're going after. But the good news, especially with what our green tech, our circular economy is going after, is it is a naive economy, right? Meaning it's brand new. Everyone in it, even if we call ourselves experts, we're still so green in that sense of our careers. And this is the wave of the future. So this is really exciting to adopt this mentality, because entrepreneurship is really, truly just a growth mentality. I'd like to end on that note, is just saying, again, I'm honored to be here, especially when it comes to green tech and the circular economy. Take a look at some really interesting things. I'm getting involved in more angel and venture capitalist groups that I'm investing both my own money and getting involved as a VC more heavily. Take a look at Project Drawdown if you haven't seen it already, including the book. You can find that, I'm sure, on Amazon. There's so many very interesting fields that are coming out of this, as I'm sure you've seen many of the speakers before this. And I'm excited. I feel like I'm starting all over again, in a sense. So please reach out if you need help with funding your business. Or any help through our careers platform or one-on-one. It would be my pleasure to connect with you, because entrepreneurship is really a growth mentality. So I'll leave it at that. And thank you again, Brock and Nick. I'll turn it back to you.
Well, thank you so much, Jackie. For me, that was quite a refreshing take, and I'm sure I speak for all of us. I greatly appreciate the honesty with respect to your journey. I think the fear of failure is something that a lot of students struggle with, particularly with taking the first steps into the new realm of entrepreneurship, and think it's a cliff. Once I fall off of, there's no coming back. And so there is light at the end of the tunnel. And my dad is going to have a huge smile on his face when he hears that I'm quoting him, but he would love to prophesize that we often learn more out of failure than we do our own successes. And so it seems like that certainly holds true in your experience. To introduce our second speaker, Dr. Adam Stager. Adam Stager graduated with his PhD in mechanical engineering from the University of Delaware in 2020. Inspired by his research, he founded Trick Robotics in 2017 with the goal of solving practical real-world problems with automation. The company originally focused on manufacturing small modular robotics for police departments and first responders, but has since pivoted to agriculture in search of more sustainable business models. In 2018, Adam won several startup competitions and attended entrepreneurial programs, including the Commission for Environmental Cooperation's Youth Innovation Challenge, to learn how to find a product market fit. Adam narrowed the focus of the company in 2019 by going all in on a concept for reducing chemical inputs on strawberry farms. In less than 1 year, the Trick Robotics team built a fully autonomous robot capable of using ultraviolet light as a non-chemical alternative for pesticides. And in 2020, their vehicle seized Roomba for strawberry fields was validated on 3 pilot farms in Delaware and West Virginia. And in 2021, they will begin paid pilots on farms in California. With that being said, I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Adam Stager to delight us with his take on student success and entrepreneurship.
Thank you so much for that great intro. Let me pull up my slides here. I'm really happy to be here. And first of all, just want to say that was a great point that Jackie made about being a student, because it's kind of a superpower in itself. because people expect you to want to learn, and it's okay to make mistakes, and it's really a great position to be in for all those students out there. So today I want to tell you a little bit about kind of the journey I've taken to get where I am, because I want you to see that I'm really similar to all of you guys who might have ideas that they want to take and start a company with. But our company, the goal that we've kind of settled on now is taking chemicals away from the food that we're growing to feed our population. And our technology, as Nick had said, is a combination of automation and ultraviolet light that's been shown to be as effective as chemical pesticides. So I'm going to start off a little bit about me, and then I'll tell you about how we founded the company before going into some of the technologies. So you guys are kind of lucky because I dug up some photos of my childhood here. And I did this because I wanted to just kind of show you, like, at my core, who I am, and even as a young child, I was building a lot of things. I had this passion for creativity and just building stuff, honestly. And I think that's really important because as a founder, you need to really be passionate about what you're doing. You have to look internally and say, what do I really love? Because you're going to be spending a lot of time doing that if that's what you're going to do as your company. So that's really important. And I was lucky to kind of understand that at a pretty young age. And it's probably not a surprise that I started as a mechanical engineer at University of Delaware as an undergrad. And as an entrepreneur, there's also a little bit of luck, and you learn a lot of things along the way. And for me, it was lucky because 3D printing was just becoming a new technology that was widely available to people at that time. And me wanting to build a lot of things, it was pretty convenient because I could think up something, and that same day I can just kind of put it together and build something that might not be very conventional. For example, this 10 tube idea that we had, and picking up tennis balls in an unconventional way was just a good example of how pretty much everything that you see in the world today is designed and developed by people just like us. It's not like somebody super, super special or super different than you and I. So we can make a big difference too. And that's really, I've always wanted to start a company so that I could make a difference in the world. But I didn't start a company right away. I took some time to work at a company. So that might be something that you all do, and you do learn a lot by doing that. And for me, it introduced me to robotics. I had no prior experience after undergrad really with doing anything in automation. And I had this in manufacturing is where I took my job. I had this robot that I was seeing pretty much every day. And it got me curious about the future and what the future would hold. And I thought, man, this robot is replacing a lot of what people would do. And it's kind of a painstaking task. So this is probably the future, And I realized that, you can, just by looking online, you can find a lot of resources that help you learn enough to do things on your own. And I think if you're curious as an entrepreneur, that's really important. And it's really easy to go online and find resources or go to networking events like this and meet people like Jackie, who you can reach out to and get advice from. But I did realize robotics is pretty complicated, and Wikipedia only really gets you so far. So I did go back for my PhD, and I was pretty lucky because I was able to leverage some of these skills I had built in 3D printing. And my PhD started with building these small mobile robots. And I think that's kind of a nice segue into how I was able to kind of start a company during my PhD, because it's a pretty big task to do. Your advisor expects a lot from you. So I started the company by making a lot of mistakes. I finished my classes and I started a ton of things all at once. So I had spent a bunch of years thinking up these ideas, and I never really had a chance to branch out and try these things. And I think that's really important for an entrepreneur, is to just get out there and try something. But one thing I did learn is if you do a bunch of things that are really unrelated, because you might have all these crazy ideas, it's pretty hard to do it during your PhD. So we ended up settling on this company, Trick. And what we did was we took these small robots I was making, and we basically scaled them up a little bit and said, well, we're doing all this great work in academia. How is that work relevant to real people? And we kind of put a lunchbox size platform together and started marketing it out. just talking to a lot of people to see where that could be useful. And I think one thing that was really important for me was having a lot of transparency between what I wanted to do and my advisor. So, when I first came to start my PhD, I made it really clear to my advisor that I was interested to start a company at some point. So he wasn't spending a lot of time trying to direct me towards academia or find different positions for me. And because of that, he was able to give me a lot of flexibility in terms of what we did. And it was great for him too. So, it can be kind of a partnership with your advisor. It doesn't have to be something where they're kind of against you, because what we ended up doing was we said, well, we're building these small robots. They might be useful in other areas, other than the Department of Defense and the things where our research was focused. And I reached out to some of the other professors at University of Delaware. And I think that's really important because, as a student, there's a lot of resources available to you. There's a lot of professors and other like-minded people who are willing and open to do different things. And we took these robots and we put them out in the field. And by doing that, actually was good for my advisor too, because he was able to start these new collaborations. So he was actually really thankful for me. So you'd think it would be kind of a battle trying to start a company and having your advisor pushing you to do research work all the time. But there can be some synergies there if you go about it in a very transparent way. So from there, it got me to agriculture. I used what I had been doing for my PhD studies to kind of get me on that track. But I realized that the things that I had pursued so far were not going to be sustainable. And that's because I basically said yes to every startup competition. So during my founding of Strict Robotics, anytime something came up, I just said yes to it. And eventually I ran into some people at the USDA who were working on strawberry fields. And for those of you who don't know, this is kind of what a strawberry field looks like. And it was a lot better than some of the other crops I had worked with. So at my time in the University of Delaware, I found that we were working in cornfields, and it was really hard to automate something in a cornfield. So stumbling upon this seemed like a really great opportunity. And it's a pretty popular fruit. This beautiful picture comes to mind. So it's kind of a sexy startup. People would be like, oh, you're working with strawberries. That's way cooler than corn, So that was like, all right, this is a good direction. And after digging into it a little bit, and this is what you should do. If you're going to start a company, you should really investigate that opportunity. And after digging into it, I realized that, wait a second, there's a dirty truth behind this fruit. 22 pesticide residues are found on this fruit on average when you buy them in the market. So there's actually quite a big problem around this strawberry crop. And if you look at how they're sprayed, this is not a good way to look forward into the future. And as innovators and entrepreneurs, it's really important to think about how what we do affects not only the future, but also the environment. And I found that, working on these other startups, I didn't feel the same amount of passion I felt as when I started walking onto these farms and talking to the farmers about how much chemicals they're using. Another thing you should really do is investigate all of the opportunity. Talk to farmers, understand all their problems, because I found that there's a lot of problems, not just with the farmers, but also with how these sprays affect the environment. A lot of wildlife is lost each year because of the chemicals that are used on these farms. So I got really excited about this. And I said, well, what if there was a non-chemical alternative that we could use in place of these chemicals? And that was kind of the new direction for me. And I dug a little bit deeper and found that it wouldn't just solve all those problems that we had found by talking with the farmers. Actually, having a natural way of producing these crops would bring in more money. Having a natural crop that you could sell, farmers could actually make 25% more income. So you're creating a better future through innovation and sustainability, and you're actually making more money for the farmer too. So you can imagine I was ecstatic. I'm ready to do this. But I wasn't sure until I started hearing from customers, and I think as an entrepreneur, it's really important to talk to as many people as possible. That's what got me to the agriculture industry to begin with. But hearing some of these quotes from some of these really big names in the strawberry industry, that's when I realized, we've got something big here. You start out on your journey looking for a problem that you want to solve, talking to a lot of people, and you have to kind of push them to talk to you. I'd say that one thing to look for as you're doing this thing called customer discovery is you want to look for the moment when people start reaching out to you. So, when you start getting phone calls from people, especially people who you haven't reached out to yet, that's a really good sign that you have a good product market fit, or you're addressing a really big problem for customers. And I think you need a good problem and also a good market, so don't, there might be a really great problem and customers who really care about getting a solution. But when I started out, I started selling robots to SWAT teams, and I realized that the market wasn't really large enough to make the amount of impact that I wanted to have. And that's another thing you should be kind of inwardly reflective of. Do you want to have a big company that's going to make a global impact, or, there's nothing wrong with starting a smaller company also. But I really wanted to make a global impact. So I realized, there needed to be a large market, and that's the next thing I looked at. I found that there's a good amount of money and kind of a nice pipeline, starting with strawberries, where we have a really big problem. More chemicals are used on strawberries than any other fruit or vegetable. So it's a great place to start using new technology to eliminate chemicals. But it also gives us a way to kind of jump into an even larger market. So I thought a little bit about, and the business is more than just numbers. You need to really think about how it makes sense to farmers or to whoever your customers are. And for us, we realized that how it made sense was we could replace these chemicals as a service. So instead of a one-time sale, like some of the things we started doing, we could now collect a monthly revenue stream. And that's really important when you're starting a company. But all the dominoes were lining up, but you really do need support from as many people as possible when you start something new. So, say yes to everything, even when it puts you on stage, like me here with the CEC. The Youth Innovation Challenge was pretty scary. I was going to be in front of a bunch of really important people out here that are making global decisions, about how we affect the environment. And I think it's okay to be outside your comfort zone. I think it's good to just pitch as much as you can. And, the more you do these things, the more you learn. You get advice every time you give a pitch, and I think it's really important. There's really a lot of opportunities out there that are available. So, keep an eye out for these types of things. And then after I did a lot of these pitches, I was by myself a lot of the time. And I realized, you really need a team of people. And I think that's another good thing about getting out there and talking a lot about what you're doing, because you end up meeting a lot of people who start to be interested in what you're doing. And I was able to build a really nice team. And as students, this is really a lot easier, I would say, because you can go to your university, you can say, hey, there's this project we're working on, and students get excited to get experience and also just be part of something. All these guys were students at University of Delaware, and they got to work on a real, vehicle-sized robot that I was kind of putting together, and they helped me a lot, and they still do. These students have now become long-term members of our company, and it really wouldn't be possible without them. So make sure you keep an eye out for other dedicated people like yourselves, and pull them in when you can. This is what we ended up with. So this is what we ended up using last season. We partnered with the largest strawberry farm in Delaware, and I guess a video is a little bit nicer to see. So, I just remind you, I started my quest in understanding robotics on Google. I just started with maybe $50 of parts, and I learned mostly by myself. And I think anyone can really do that. It doesn't matter how complicated something might seem. You can really make a lot of progress if you have a little dedication and curiosity. Now, one of the challenges and really interesting things about this UVC, which is ultraviolet light technology, is it has to happen at night. So that's one of the tricks to making it work. So it ends up being kind of cool because the robot has this kind of sci-fi look as it's going through the field. And I think this was some of the challenges we had trying to make this work at night, but it was also really good for the farmers because now, instead of doing these sprays, it's something that's kind of like a giant field Roomba. It just sits on the side of the field and automatically goes through the field and performs these treatments. So as an entrepreneur, you also want to think of the future, especially as the founder. So I think we're on a really good track now. We've done 3 pilot sites. We're going to be expanding paid pilots next year. But as the founder, you also want to look at the future of how this company can grow. And for me, we've started to make really strong progress with UVC, but there's other opportunities that we can leverage. And I think talking about our technology is one way that we can learn about new opportunities and meet new people who can help support these initiatives. So with that, I think my time is pretty much up here. I just want to leave you with just always say yes as an entrepreneur, and don't be afraid of challenges that face you and feeling uncomfortable. I've felt uncomfortable so many times, and really at the end of the day, it's you make your own luck, and it's really rewarding being able to speak at events like this. So yeah, good luck everybody, and looking forward to the questions.
Thanks, Adam, for what was a great presentation. For the sake of time, I'll save my candor and thoughts to maybe the question and answer period, but definitely a lot of questions brewing in my mind. Next on deck, I am excited to introduce Victoria Tan, a colleague of mine and fellow youth ambassador for the North American EcoInnovation Network. Victoria is a founding member, part of my French accent, I might butcher some of these words. So Victoria is a founding member of Entrepreneurship, a local and social currency initiative in Quebec City. From 2016 to 2019, she was the chair of Enactus Laval University, a nonprofit committed to entrepreneurial action. Her experience in advising some 40 students active in 5 social entrepreneurship projects and enterprises has led her to disseminating results nationwide and participate in numerous competitions, which contributed to promoting these same initiatives and furthering their influences. Victoria is the first Quebecer to be named the HSBC Woman Leader of Tomorrow. She is renowned for her skills in project management, communication, social entrepreneurship, and is the recipient of the Lieutenant Governor's Youth Medal. Her greatest sense of fulfillment comes from contributing to strengthening her community's economic and social fabric. And with that being said, I give the floor to Victoria.
Thank you, Nick, for your presentation. It's a great pleasure for me to talk about social entrepreneurship. Our project is a social enterprise in Quebec. So I'm going to begin by presenting my project and then my own how I launched this project. You can't ignore a homeless person. So when we watch YouTube,
interprète, je l'écoute sur le même canal que toi.
When we watch a video on YouTube, is to click to ignore the ad. But as a young student, we can't ignore the social problems. I think we can't ignore those problems. You youngsters like me, people like Broke, organizations like the CEC consider the enterprise as a way to solve problem of our society, a way to improve the health or the social situation of our community. That's why we launched our project Entredons. So this project has been launched in the Quebec City, specifically in the neighborhood, Saint-Roch neighborhood. It's the neighborhood with the highest unemployment rate in all country, a neighborhood that is facing a deep transformation with deep contrast between the past and the future, with a big number of vulnerable people, while at the same time some there's a new population in this neighborhood with so there's a kind of gentrification of this neighborhood. So contrast between two very different populations. So our project decided to launch a local currency. What's a local currency? It's a currency that can be used in the local shops. So maybe you can see in the picture that the token looks like a Canadian dollar. So we often wonder as young people, how can we really help the vulnerable people without discrimination, without paternalism? So by taking into account different point of view and different expertise, we created this token that looks like a Canadian dollar that allow us to empower people. How does it work? This $1 token allow people to buy with the partner's shop, token that can be given directly to homeless people. Those homeless people can go use those tokens to buy what they want except tobacco and alcohol. So our first partnerships, I mean, one has been L'Aube Rivière, with the largest organization for homeless people in Quebec. We know that during the winter, winter is very cold in Quebec, that are doing a very useful work. Some shops, like Intermarché, Brunet, accept also those tokens, so those people can buy food or other products. The idea is to empower those homeless people and that they can feel respected, that they can get back some of their dignity. So we're trying to find a high number of partnerships with the residents, with the local shops, and also with the city of Quebec through the municipal council. We launched this project after wondering how we could help our community. So this project is a concrete way to give, to improve the solidarity between the resident, the homeless, and the shop owner, and increase the solidarity. But it shouldn't be only an economic project, but also a social one. You certainly often face people who ask you some money, and we often try to ignore those people or to walk away because we think that those people will use it to buy tobacco or alcohol. But if we take time to sit with those people, it helps them to feel, not to feel invisible, and to feel, to get back their dignity. So during 1 year, before launching the project, we found the answer to our questions when we saw the impact of our project. We estimate that some 1,000 tokens that would be circulating in Quebec, but after just 1 day, 500 tokens had been sold, and after a couple of weeks, all the 1,000 token was sold. And today, after only 1.5 years, there's already 2,000 tokens and that are circulating, and this project is extending to the rest of Canada and even in Europe. So as I told you, we had different questions, but we found an answer through the impact we saw from our project. And for me, the highest value is the trust. When you see that your project is an answer to a need, a social need, we saw some articles in the press in Quebec, in Canada, and even in Europe. However, the most important is the following. Can someone be a student and an entrepreneur at the same time? I think that the other panelists already answered this question. The answer is yes, but I'd like to share some advice, my own advices. I'm a professional in health. I finished my MBA in health, but I don't consider myself as an entrepreneur. And sometimes people think that to be an entrepreneur, you need to have your own company, but I don't agree. Launching a company is one way to be an entrepreneur, but it's not the only way. You can be an entrepreneur within your own organization. The social entrepreneurship also brings innovation and leadership to bring a concrete and sustainable impact. One of the most important things as a student is that you can contact people from different faculties, teachers, students, to try to engage them in your own project. Because by having access to different expertise, your project is more likely to respond to a real need. Me and my colleague, we belong to different faculties Faculty of Medicine, Administration, in engineering or design. Those different people contributed to this project, and thanks to those different expertise, we've been successful. The other panelists already talk about the networking. Jackie talked about that. It's one of the best advice we can give you. Try to go to meet people, to take part to challenges. The Youth Innovation Challenge is a good example. Try also to build a network with other sector, other people that can help you to improve your project. Knowing more people give you another advantage when you have been contacting politicians, different kind of people. You'll find that a lot of people will be ready to help you. So try to get their advice, and maybe one day they may take part to your own project, because in the end, we're creating social relations. So we need to find as many stakeholders as possible. By doing so, you can maximize the value of your project, a community-based project. A few numbers here that I like to analyze, but by analyzing the impact of your project, give more credibility to your project when taking part to a challenge or when asking for some grants. By being able to show real number, by quantify your impact, you'll be more likely to win challenges, to get grants, and to get more help from future partners. And it also allow you to have an annual report and to give a precise number. So we are trying to find a long-term, to empower our community in the long term. If you're lucky enough to be able to share your own experience with younger people, for example, in the schools, in secondary schools, don't hesitate to do it, because it brings some social entrepreneurship spirit to the rest of the community, and try to improve the social and environmental improve our society. So my last advice, keeping a balance. it's often quite challenging to be dealing with the exams, our studies, and our project, but you also need to keep some time for yourself. For example, if you already know when you'll have your final exams, it's okay to tell your team to dedicate less time to your project for a few weeks, because you need to, you can have a higher impact if you know when to focus. And I'll conclude with the following word. Alone you go faster, but together you go longer. If you go to Quebec, I would love to take a coffee with you in English or in French. Thanks to the organizer for their invitation.
Thank you, Victoria, for a great presentation. Last but not least on our panel today, we'll be having the pleasure of listening to Anna Wright, who is the co-founder and director of innovation at SheCycle, a startup focused on developing an antimicrobial reusable menstrual pad for women in Uganda. 2018, SheCycle was the global winner of the World's Challenge, an international pitch competition for business ventures targeting the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. A graduate in health studies in the health studies program here at the University of Waterloo, Anna has always had a deep passion for solving important problems in women's health. And in addition to her role at SheCycle, she works part-time as a service designer and researcher meeting the needs of low-income and refugee women. Anna?
Hello, thank you so much for the opportunity today. I am just absolutely amazed at all of the other panelists' stories. Thank you so much for just being able to be here with you today. And so as Nick mentioned, I'm Anna. I'm part of a team developing an antimicrobial reusable menstrual pad for women in Uganda. And the reason that I started in that was actually that I had a problem that I wanted to solve. I didn't start out wanting to start a business. That wasn't really on my radar at all, actually. So I started out and I lived in a village in Uganda for a few months, and I shadowed a midwife there. And while I was living there, I became the witness to a lot of huge women's health problems that a lot of women face in especially developing countries around the world. And when I returned here, I couldn't stop thinking about them. The problem that most affected me was maternal mortality rates. And so after sitting with it for a few months, I decided that I was going to do something about it. And I actually started out trying to start a nonprofit. And we obviously didn't end up taking that route. So I started out looking at maternal mortality, and I Googled how to start a nonprofit. And that actually led me to a pre-incubator program at the University of Waterloo called Greenhouse. And the beauty of that program, and the reason why it was so helpful to me, is that it was a pre-incubator program. So it was kind of before you have a business idea, but you have a problem to solve. And for me, that was my most important learning in getting into the field of entrepreneurship, was to figure out what problem you want to solve first. Because as an entrepreneur, and especially as a student, that problem looks totally different as you start to learn more and more about it. And hopefully that's one of the main things that you're doing throughout your entrepreneurial journey, is continuing to learn more and more about that problem, kind of like Adam was talking about with the strawberries. And so as I was looking at this problem of maternal mortality, I actually started 2 other startups that aren't SheCycle, and both of those failed. So as Jackie was saying, failure is also important. Neither of those startups lasted very long for me. I started a coffee shop, and I also started another kind of side business before I started out with SheCycle. And so Brock was actually a large part of SheCycle starting, because a few friends and I had gotten together and we were talking about this issue in women's health, where girls weren't going to school when they were on their periods, especially in developing countries, and that was affecting their education. since I've spent a lot of time learning about that, I've learned it's not that simple. There's a lot more factors involved, but that was our original problem that we were interested in solving. And so through the World's Challenge, we were able to craft this solution of a reusable menstrual pad. And we kind of had our preliminary idea for SheCycle and what it could become. And so with our success there, Brock was actually our mentor and was able to help us to navigate where we might go next with that journey. So where that leaves me now is that we have a startup that we're actively trying to problem solve through and trying to figure out, what does this look like in COVID? No, we can't travel anymore. So that pilot project that we were going to be launching, sorry about my mic here, that pilot project that we were going to be launching never happened because it was supposed to happen in April. And for me, I think that's one of the areas that I've had the most learning as a student entrepreneur, is because everything has to be flexible all the time. And everything is about learning. So we've learned about this specific problem of women not going to school or not going to work because of their menstruation. But we've also learned just how to solve problems and how to approach a problem, and how to network with people and, you know, garner all of our resources together. And so for me, what I'm hoping to get through this whole entrepreneurship experience of being an entrepreneur is actually less about business and more about learning how to solve really big problems, which I think is where we find that niche of being able to use entrepreneurship to solve environmental issues. And so for me, everything kind of fell into place once we decided this is our problem. Then we were able to figure out what did the different components of a solution look like, and realized that one of the most sustainable ways to do that is actually through creating a business or a social enterprise. And so for me, actually, I'm not in business. I have a health degree. So I really wouldn't consider myself an entrepreneur if I wasn't plunked into the middle of this world of entrepreneurship, realizing that, oh, I run a business. I guess I am an entrepreneur. But for me, being in health, and I'm sure this is similar to what you would feel, Victoria, is that healthcare, as I see it now through the lens of entrepreneurship, is more about solving big problems and figuring out how to put all of these different pieces together: the social determinants of health, the financial determinants of health, the political determinants of health, and different groups experiencing the world differently. And how all of that comes together is in solving problems, which can be done through entrepreneurship. And I think the same can be said about environmental issues, that it's not just science, it's not just changing our behaviors. It can actually be something that we look at on a really big picture scale. And as a student, you're in the perfect place to be doing that, because you're at a university where you have all of these world-class experts, actual experts at your fingertips. So one of the things that I was able to do that I don't think I would have been able to do if I were not a student was asking for coffee with all of those people. At one point, I sat down with someone who was an expert in the global rice trade, and we talked about coffee trade, and I was trying to figure out, like, how do I solve this problem with equitable coffee prices? And there's just so many different ways that you can do it. And especially if you're at like a younger age, there's science to back up that students' brains are innovative, like physiologically innovative. So you're at that point where you can look at someone and say, like, okay, yeah, the global rice trade is totally connected to maternal mortality rates in Uganda. So you're at this beautiful opportunity to be able to just explore, and then be able to also use that to bring things together, and find solutions that you might not be able to learn about otherwise. So I would like to talk about some of the really specific ways that I found helped how I could be a student and also be an entrepreneur at the same time, because it is a really tricky balance. For me, one of the things that I found most helpful was that I could tailor my courses to be about my startup. being very, very transparent about it. I would ask my professors, you know, I need to do a bunch of research on urinary tract infections because that has to do with my startup. We're like antimicrobial because we're trying to avoid urinary tract infections. So I would ask my pathophysiology prof, can I do my end of term research project on urinary tract infections? And it works beautifully because there's so much time that you have to put into your venture and your business, and all of that research that you're doing actually can be used. Like all the research that you're doing for your degree can be used. It's useful. And I think prior to running a business, I didn't think of my assignments as useful. They kind of felt like busy work a lot of the time. And that also changed my drive to do well in school. So I kind of found this balance eventually where I could use this passion that I had for solving this huge problem to give me energy to do really well on different assignments that I was being given. And that obviously won't work for everyone, but I was really fortunate that it was able to work for me, and that I had professors that were really interested in being flexible. The other thing that was really helpful for me was that at the University of Waterloo, there are a lot of courses that you can take that help you to get credit for all of the work that you're doing for your venture. So I actually got 3 course credits through doing that. So for one of them, I just ran a coffee shop and completed assignments. It was an independent study, and I was trying to solve maternal mortality through equitable coffee trade. And then for another one of them, I was running SheCycle, and I took it as a business entrepreneurship and technology course. And so there's different ways that you can pair that depending on what's available at your university. So that was really helpful for me. But I'm going to be honest, when I first started out, I was really only working on SheCycle. I wasn't doing enough school, and my statistics grades show it. And I think that that was an important part of my journey too, to learn what my limits are, and to learn what is too much and what I can handle. Because the reality is I would love to have limitless energy and limitless time, but I don't. And so trying to figure out exactly how much of myself I had left and how much time I had left to work on things was really helpful. And last, my advice to you is just do it. A lot of people told me that I couldn't have a real venture if I didn't drop out of school and, you know, go off and be the SheCycle lady full time. But I think the reality is that I did a lot better and did it a lot more thoroughly and with more intention because I was in school and because I had access to all of those resources where I could ask a question in my class that happened to pop into my head because I was working on this other thing for SheCycle. And I wouldn't have done it differently. I definitely appreciated being in school as much as it was an extra thing to add to my plate. And so you can definitely be an entrepreneur and be a serious entrepreneur while you're in school. But at the same time, you can be a not serious entrepreneur while you're in school. You're in school to learn. And entrepreneurship is hands down the best work experience that I had throughout my undergrad. 100% directed by what I was interested in and what experience I wanted to get that I wouldn't have necessarily had access to in a workplace. And I was able to do that amazing networking with people who are experts in their field. And honestly, what do you have to lose? You're students who already don't have money. You have a ton of time. You probably don't have a whole lot of people that are depending on you at this point in your life. And as much as it does feel like your time is constrained, I actually calculated it at one point. And if I spent a full work week on my classes, you've still got a ton of time left in your week. So don't see it as a barrier. I would say I would rather be a student starting a venture than be partway through my career. Being a student entrepreneur is a huge opportunity, I think. So those are the thoughts I'd like to leave with you. And thank you so much again, Brock, for this opportunity. And I am just so amazed by all of you panelists. So I hope that you are able to take something away from my thoughts today. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna, and to all our panelists for a great series of discussions and insights into the world and intersection between student life and entrepreneurial success. At this point, I'd like to take us into our Q&A period. So if you haven't already, please do start typing in your questions and submitting them into the Q&A function below. We had a couple pre-submitted, and the general way I think we'll go about this is just leave it open to the floor, and whoever wants to take the lead, seize the reins. And so the first question comes from Sylvie Hebert. And so her question, she has a green business, or she feels like she has green business ideas and has a passion for improving our environment. I get energized when I think of my ideas. However, I'm not someone who typically likes to take risks. So do you think someone who tends to be risk averse should still consider starting a green business? And what are some of your suggestions to minimize those risks when starting a business?
Sure, I'll jump in here. Great question. I would first and foremost actually physically write out what you think you're going to lose by trying it. It's actually very simple, especially at this stage of your business, in the ideation stage, pre-validation stage, right? So I would write out all of the possibilities and then write out what is the exact worst case scenario, right? Which is your loss of reputation, potentially, if people judge you for even trying, which by the way, you probably don't want them in your network, if that's the case. You want to, of course, find those that want to support you through these tougher times, right? But two, you want to write out what exactly are some experiments, just like a science experiment. I had this in my notes, but I always run out of time. So you want to approach it like a science experiment, and first develop a hypothesis, and then actually run the experiments, numerous experiments, ideally in parallel, and collect data along the way. Find out what's working, what's not working. All of us as entrepreneurs, we were pivoting along the way over and over and over again. We still are. I still am. 20 years of, or well, 15 years out of school. So I would say write out, though, what is the worst case scenario? For my careers platform, I know the worst case scenario is that I tried to help more people than what I can physically help in my current business. And that's a pretty darn good worst case scenario to be in, right? The other time would be opportunity cost, right? So my time away from my company that actually does make money. So we're, sectioning off certain amount of times to do that. So just think about the pros and cons, do a SWOT analysis, right? Things like that will help you kind of logically go through what could you lose, or what will you lose if it fails? And then what will you gain, even through that failure, and or if it wins and you validated your product and you have some paying clients. So that would be my advice, where to start.
Thank you, Jackie.
I also have a comment on that. It really takes a team to make a difference as an entrepreneur. You don't have to be the only one working on a project. And I think having a little bit of risk adverse, like having risk adverse people on the team is actually, that could be a strong point. And, somebody might be just a crazy person trying to do something like totally insane, and you might actually be a really good co-founder to that person. So I think it's definitely worth going to these events that, if there's startup events, or now that everything's virtual, you have a lot of opportunity to join things like this. And, you can increase your network and find these people that can maybe be partners in some efforts.
Thank you, Adam. The next question comes from Danielle Estrella, who asks, how important is emotional education in these uncertain times? And how can emotional education really be used as a tool for supporting grounded and green startups?
I'll jump in again since nobody else unmuted yet. I guess it's exceptionally important right now, and it's very hard to encompass when you're still a student, right? I think everyone right now worldwide is stressed in one way or the other, from a health perspective, from a fear perspective, financial perspective. Everyone, including myself, most businesses have been hit severely. I had many clients that went out of business, couldn't pay the bills, things like that. So it is a stressful time, and we're still going through the emotions of that. Luckily, we've had enough clients, because we're 15 years into the business, that we're going to be fine. I navigated this in 2008 when the market crashed, and I was a new grad, having like 30 people on payroll, and that was very stressful. So that being said, I would I would take some time to take a look at like what are the actual things you can do right now. How can you segment parts of your life that are positive, negative, and the emotionality of that, and eliminate any distractions. I guess that's kind of my default, is anytime I'm overwhelmed or whatnot, is eliminate distractions, try and go back to the basics. And for anybody on the really tougher emotional times, I grew up in an environment, I'm half Korean, where the Asian perspective, and I should say, you know, I'll preface this, or my perspective was that you don't talk about emotions, you don't talk about the emotional intelligence side of things, or emotional health, or anxiety, depression, things like that. And entrepreneurs are many times going to go through very tough times that will press your limits with that. And I ended up taking a year and a half off of work due to emotional overwhelm. I did CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. And I think that should be taught in every school growing up, from like kindergarten onwards. I think we should be taught meditation and cognitive behavioral therapy and other things that are resources out there. And that's something that wasn't spoken about growing up, and you know, maybe there's other people from similar cultural upbringings with that today. So I would recommend going and speaking to a counselor, speaking to a therapist when things get rough, and especially speaking to friends who are your closest confidants and telling them that you're doing not okay. It's okay to be not all right. And so I hope that touches on it. I realize it's a very large question, so hopefully that is a little tidbit that can help.
Thank you, Jackie. And thank you for bringing a human element. I know, you know, sometimes entrepreneurs can seem like these immune superheroes who are able to overcome any obstacle and are void of emotions. But so thank you for providing a personal perspective to that. The next question comes from me, Lynn, as a reflection. And so do you sense any, or can you speak to some of the main differences between the initiatives that you ran successfully versus unsuccessfully? And if so, what are those key differentiating points that stand out to you?
I can speak to that very briefly. The main difference for me was that I had a team when we succeeded. I was not a good entrepreneur on my own, largely because it's very emotional. I'm a risk-averse person, and I was always caught in the research phase. Like, I'm a researcher, that's what I do, and I have a lot of trouble taking action on things. So in my earlier startups, I would spend weeks researching whether or not it was a good idea to branch off in this direction, and maybe we should pivot. And there was a lot of self-doubt involved. And when I had a team, it was this supportive environment where we were all in the same boat and we all understood each other's strengths and weaknesses. And if I was really intimidated to send that email, then maybe one of my co-founders could do it. So that was one of the biggest differences for me.
Thank you, Anna. Any other panelists?
Yeah. So I think something really important is to listen to the customers or potential customers you talk to, because there's a lot of things that seem like problems, especially as an engineer. You know, I can create a lot of problems that aren't actual problems for people and build a lot of stuff no one cares about. So I think you really have to look for that product market fit. And, you know, like I said during my talk, like you need, when you're talking about a problem that matters to a customer, they start calling you back. Like, you shouldn't be constantly calling them. And for me, you know, I explore a lot of different directions, and I think that was the really big differentiator. You know, I started getting these calls back. I knew I had something.
Thank you, Adam. We'll maybe take this one last question before we wrap up the formal Q&A session. And again, I urge all the attendees to reach out to each of our panelists and engage them directly. They've certainly shared an openness and willingness to have discussions beyond the sort of temporal limitations of our talk here. So this comes from Gabriella. And speaking, certainly hearing some of our panelists, you know, where you are today maybe isn't necessarily where you saw yourselves when you first stepped foot onto your university campus. And so if you didn't have your own business, or you weren't doing what you're doing right now, what do you think you would be doing?
I think I can jump in. Good question, Gabriela. I think, Anna, you understand me. We work in healthcare. So when I got into college, I always thought that I'm going to be with my patients all day, treating people with hernia or pain, back pain. But I never thought to have a career in social responsibility. Although, like I said, I think entrepreneurship, entrepreneuriat and not entrepreneurship, can be a solution if you want to make a change, a positive change in your community. I don't think that you need to have a business or a clinic or any enterprises to change the world. So you can do it in your own organization or with the team, with your team. Entraidant, or we can call it high five in English. I'm not gonna make a living with this project. I always think that it's going to be a community project that will be led by students, but I think it's a great opportunity if you don't want to have your business to be an entrepreneur.
Thank you, Victoria. All right, well, with that being said, I want to thank everyone for participating in this discussion and submitting such great questions. At this point, I'd like to give the floor to Dominique Couteau, someone I've worked with closely over the past year, who is part of the CEC and is one of those people who has certainly worked behind the scenes, helping to put this Green Entrepreneurship Workshop Series together. So thank you, Dominique, and the entire staff at the CEC. Without his support and effort, this certainly would not have achieved the success and the reach that it has. Dominique has a very broad academic background, including both bachelor's and master's degrees in engineering, a degree in East Asian studies, and a master's degree in environmental assessment. He's worked as an engineer in the private sector, a university instructor, and as a researcher with the Stockholm Environment Institute in Sweden. So very strong and diverse background. I believe Dominic is going to speak to the CEC's Youth Innovation Challenge. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Absolutely, loud and clear.
Thank you, Nick and Brock, for giving me the opportunity to present. Yes, so for the last 4 years, the CEC has been organizing the annual Youth Innovation Challenge. This challenge basically invites young entrepreneurs from Canada, Mexico, and the United States to submit their innovative solution to address environmental challenges. So over the years, we have received over 600 solutions from participants. So it's impressive to see that the environmental solutions are there, and what they need is just a little bit of support to help them get off the ground. What's interesting about the Youth Innovation Challenge is that in addition to receiving seed fundings, the winner get the opportunity to present their solution to the top environmental officials of the 3 countries. So it's a Environment and Climate Change Canada in Canada. In the US, it's the EPA, and in Mexico, it's Semarnat. So you've heard from Adam and Trick Robotics, who won the challenge from the United States in 2019. This year in 2020, the winners were in Canada, a startup called Bruised, which is a home-run women-run food enterprise to combat food waste. And in Mexico, the startup that won was called No Plastic, which is developing biodegradable bioplastic made from agricultural waste. And in the United States, the winner was a startup called Rebundle, which is developing a plant-based synthetic hair that reduces skin issues and also eliminates single-use plastic because it's compostable. So there's a lot of innovative ideas out there. So if you're curious to know more about the Youth Innovation Challenge, or you would like to know more about the work of the CEC in general and our other youth initiatives, you can visit our website at cec.org.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominique. And that brings us to the near conclusion of today's discussion, and also to the Green Entrepreneurship Workshop Series. It seems like we just started the first event the other day, and here we are already at the end. But I do want to point, the discussion does not end here, nor should it. What this workshop has certainly shown me is that the barriers to being able to interact with entrepreneurs all over the world, are so easily overcome now with a quick direct message, a quick email, and a quick phone call. You can get amazing insights that span geographic, temporal, and cultural context as well, and get really valuable lessons. I would also be remiss if we didn't give thanks where thanks is due to Brock Dickinson, to the University of Waterloo, the CEC, to all our presenters, and especially the unheralded heroes, our translators, who have made this workshop series accessible in 3 different languages. So thank you to everyone who put this together. I've gotten tremendous value out of it, and undoubtedly, I would say the same for many of our participants. I'll give the floor back to Brock at this point so he can wrap up and provide his final words of insight. So Brock, thank you on behalf of everyone here today.
That's great, Nick. Thank you very much for your role as MC. You've really kept us on track, and you've kept the session together. And thank you for inspiring young entrepreneurs who've just done amazing things. And we learn so much from the examples that you set. And I can see in the comments in the chat the excitement that has built just as people listen to the ideas that you've shared and the experiences that you've described to us. I also want to give a few thanks. It's hard to believe this is the 6th and final session. I think, with hundreds and hundreds of registrants and participants over the past few weeks, we will do this again. We will find a way to develop some sort of a session where we can start to bring people back, because I think we've begun to create a really amazing community here in these online sessions. I also want to say thank you in particular to the interpreters, both this week and in previous weeks. It's not easy to do this as we talk about strange, innovative new ideas in multiple languages, and we all speak far too quickly when we do it. So thank you to each of them for their help over the past few weeks. I want to thank a few folks specifically at the CEC who have been the backbone around which we've built this program. I want to thank Dominique Croteau, who you met a few minutes ago. I want to thank Catherine Holmick, Dr. Georgina O'Farrell, and Armando Yanez Sandoval, who have all been working in the background to help make this series such a success. And we've had some amazing people participate. If we go back to the first week, I think we had Richard Morgan, the executive director of the CEC. We had Jonathan Wilkinson, the Environment and Climate Change Minister of Canada. We've had amazing participants, and this session today was no less amazing with the students who have been part of this. I want to sort of close with sort of one final thought that really sort of struck me as I was thinking about today's session. We heard from Victoria, who is in Quebec City today. The last time I saw Victoria, we were in Puerto Rico earlier this year before things closed down. We heard from Adam, who is in Newark, Delaware today. The last time I saw Adam was in Mexico City a little over a year and a half ago. We may feel like we're far apart in this kind of pandemic phase. We're all sitting on our computers in distant locations. We're in multiple countries. But really, we're a small community. And I think if you've taken nothing else from these sessions over the last 6 weeks, remember that we are a community. In some sense, we are a kind of a family of entrepreneurs looking to use entrepreneurship to really change the world. And I'm excited to think about the new ventures that will come out of the ideas and the hearts of those who have been participating. And if there's any way that I or any of the others who you've heard from over the past few weeks can help, don't hesitate to reach out. We're thrilled to have been able to share this information with you, and we look forward to telling your success stories in the years to come. Thanks very much. Until next time, we'll see you then. Bye-bye.